As Brian mentioned, I'm Jeff Hassan. I'm a strategist at Possible Mobile. We build mobile apps like the Turner apps, PGA Tour, CNN, among others. And I also am an author of a couple of mobile books, including a current one called The Art of Mobile Persuasion. And among the topics that I covered in that book were what we're going to discuss here. I have a really smart group of panelists. I'm going to take a moment and introduce them. That way we can get right into the Q&A. So we have down all the way on the far right there, we have Jude McCullough, who is the CEO of Localytics. He has spent the last 20 years in software. If you don't know, Localytics is a leading mobile engagement platform, works with over 37,000 apps, and has such customers as ESPN, Fox, and the New York Times. In the middle here, I've got George Deglin, who is the CEO of OneSignal. It's a widely used mobile and web push notification platform. We have also Andrew Burnbreyer, who is the GM Managing Director of Aplift. And Aplift is a comprehensive mobile marketing platform that works both in acquisition and re-engagement. And finally, from mParticle, I have Adam, whose company integrates all of your data and orchestrates it across platforms, something we'll be talking specifically about here. And clients for mParticle include Chick-fil-A, I've worked on that business, Turner, Airbnb, and Spotify. So I was coming here and I used Google Maps, and it told me where I am, and that was awesome. But coming to the show, I really wanted to delve in with these folks on where are we as an industry. And to throw it out there, I actually think that we've got some work to do. I think we've made some progress, but I'm still getting meatball sandwich offers, and I'm a vegetarian, and I go to the same establishments. So Jude, I want to start out with you and ask you, what's different from last year? And is my barometer or gauge accurate?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can answer what's different from last year. I wasn't here, but I can answer what's different from my perspective as being a newcomer. Prior to being the CEO of Localytics, I was running a company that had about 100 million monthly active users across the world. And I got up every day, and I, to some extent, appreciate your lives, which is I was trying to understand what was going on with my user base. Fast forward what's going on a year today, I think we're still in this period where we spend a heavy concentration on getting users. And to some extent, I think we're there. Some of you may be in different stages of that. I think what we're at today is really not doing a lot with our users in a way that provides meaningfulness to our users, so as such that they do something. They do something with a brand, they do something with a conversion.
Right.
And all of that has to happen because there's a lot of big shifts going on as macro trends that we'll probably get into.
Yep.
So growth has happened, but interacting with users hasn't happened in a way that I think is satisfying.
Okay. Adam, your opinion on progress from last year, or maybe standing still, or heaven forbid, moving in the wrong direction?
Yeah, I think one of the big changes has just been the lens on consumer data privacy in the last year, right? With Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, GDPR, it's just consumers are paying more attention. Doesn't necessarily mean that their expectations have changed, right? They still expect the same experience. So that falls on us as the vendors and as the marketers to figure out, well, how do we think about the world from like the privacy by design lens? How do we make sure that privacy is at the core of what we're doing while we are trying to still deliver the customer experience at an optimal level? And frankly, it's a really tough challenge. I think having companies like us all work together to help make it easier for brands to solve those problems is really what needs to happen. And a lot of companies aren't there, right? That they've reacted to GDPR, but it wasn't because they wanted to, and it wasn't in the best interest of the customer. It was in the best interest of protecting themselves from litigation. So I really think that that has been a core factor that's changed how businesses are operating. And I think that there's a lot of work to still be done there. I think in order to really deliver on the experiences, there's going to always be this gap until we get that privacy angle really figured out.
Okay. George, I know that I think I saw a stat in the first 9 months of the year, or over a 9-month period, pushes had increased 300%, which first take would be that's great. Brands are understanding that there's some value there. You also might ask how many are enough or how many are too many. So from your point of view, last Postback to this Postback, what are you seeing different?
Yeah, I mean, the big change we've seen is the volume of notifications users receive keeps rising. With the introduction of things like web push in particular, these new channels are opening up and users are just finding themselves inundated with more and more messages. You also have the fact that notifications don't really have any limit on them, has really pushed a lot of publishers to overwhelm some of their users with things that maybe are less relevant, less personalized, less effective, just because the channel exists.
Yep.
We're seeing the platforms start to fight against this towards providing a better user experience. With iOS 12, Apple's introducing a feature where notifications that have lower engagement will actually no longer be shown to users on their lock screen. So it's becoming increasingly important not just to send more messages, but to be very mindful of making sure the messages are relevant, that you're sending the right amount, and that you're making sure that each message you send is as personalized and as effective as possible if you want to still maintain that presence of being like the notification that gets seen and not the one that gets relegated to the lock or the history screen.
Yeah, and Adam, same question for you. From a consumer perspective also, are there things that have changed? Are end users better off? I'm sorry, Andrew.
You know, you're not the
Apologies.
first person to call me Adam, even though my name's Andrew. It's been going on like my entire life. It might be confusing for
Same initials.
the two of us up here. Yeah, we're both AB as well. So I think, why don't we just field each other's questions from now on? Let's keep everyone on their toes. What was the question, Jeff?
So the question is the change of last year to
What's the change from last year to this year?
and how could it be tangible to an end user?
Sure. Well, even a little bit farther ago, 3 years ago, I was on this stage here talking about data privacy. This was before GDPR was really rolled out, and it was the early stages of it. And we were talking about, what's the trade-off? Would people be willing to share their data and allow you to use it? What would be the value prop for that? And we use an example of, well, if I see an ad for shoes or for sneakers, and more specifically for socks to wear with those sneakers, would that make sense for me? And it would, because I currently don't have any socks on. So what we're seeing is, the trade-off between users now are much more willing to share their data as long as they're getting something back for it. And that's where I think that we come in, and maybe some other companies here, where it's about showing the right ad at the right time. And we've been saying that, and I think a lot of companies out there have been saying something to that effect for years, but it hasn't really changed. Generally, people are doing very blanket marketing, and most of the cohort-specific user data is only being used by the apps and the big box companies to more understand their user base, but not act on it. So I think now going forward, it's much more about how am I using my user-by-user information to create specific campaigns and specifically targeted advertisements for those individual users, as opposed to just let's do a scatter shot and see what happens.
Okay. I want to go back to the end to Jude. When it comes to the various technologies that a brand needs to employ, how do we make that less intimidating? And how do we make sure that we have pieces that fit within a puzzle, as opposed to being something that is so confounding to a buyer that they go, this isn't worth the effort?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and I think about it every day, and I don't have a great answer. I think, though, to step back to the assessment of the problem, that is the problem. I think this supply chain is really, really, really complicated. And there are a lot of good companies. They're all relatively small. They're all relatively niche. And the difficulty is the whole damn thing isn't moving fast enough for the customer or the user because of this fragmentation. And that, by the way, is not a new phenomenon. That happens with all sorts of technology sectors. typically what happens is external factors come in. People buy you, or capital, or liquidity, or IPOs, and that hasn't happened in these industries that we're all associated with for the last couple of years. So what do? I think you just got to get really, really, really close to your supplier or your vendor, and I think you've got to push them exceptionally hard on what do they have today, because I'd be willing to suggest that everybody here has more utilization or capability in the technology components than you're leveraging. And that would be my call to action for you all. We need to innovate better on our side so that we can allow data to flow more easily, experience to be across the marketing stack and other things. There's no doubt. But there is a doubt that our customers collectively aren't gaining enough value from what we have. And if I had to be provocative, that would be my provocative statement. Work with everybody to say, hey, are we using 10%? We're using 80%, and how do we move in that spectrum?
Adam, how do you look at the world in terms of the role that your company and companies like yours can play in terms of making it easier for a marketer to get where they need to go?
Yeah, I mean, this is very relevant for the world that we come from at mParticle. And I feel that, Jude hit it on the head. There's a lot of different technologies that are being built that are really good at very specific problems. And that's not going to change, right? AWS is so prevalent and the cost is so low compared to where we were 10 years ago that businesses can be created to solve specific problems with relatively low barriers to entry. So that challenge is going to continue. So what does it take? It takes an organization to come into the market and really think about, okay, it's not just us going to solve the problem of the customer. We have to work with the ecosystem, and we have to have an open approach. And we have to think about the APIs that we want to put in place that are real time and offer the ability to enable data to flow in the right way so that when we want to deliver that real-time, personalized, contextual experience, we understand it's not going to be just through our technology. It's going to be through a combination of technologies that we've composed together. And I think, one of the things that I see, I'm in a fortunate place where I work with the entire ecosystem. I run the ecosystem for us. We're over 200 partners. Is that while a lot of companies may not be ready and a lot of vendors may not be ready in terms of the interfaces or the way that they connect, everybody's trying to get there. Everybody's evolving their thinking that it's not just it's us or take the high road mentality. It's now very much a rising tide floats all boats mentality. And we're all thinking about it from a customer-centric perspective as you build out your best-in-class stack. And so I think that just continues. And my challenge would be that I think the vendors are actually proactively getting there. So now you look at the marketers and it's like, well, okay, so customers are going to be willing, smart consumers are willing to give you the data. Are you ready when they give you that data to deliver the experience across your stack? And I think that the question's got to be, well, do we have the real-time architecture in place? Do we have the different technologies that bring this all together?
George, what's your point of view on making it more seamless and also giving confidence to a buyer that what you are selling or somebody like you is selling is going to be complementary and not be in the way?
Yeah, I agree a lot with the things that Adam said. The way we look at it, especially given the volume of clients that we work with, it's really important for us as a vendor and a lot of the other folks here to think about educating the market on how to take advantage of the shifts in technology and the shifts that are happening. There is so much that we may know that they are just not thinking about. It's not necessarily, they're not staying on top of the latest technology trend. They're not staying on top of what other companies like them are asking for or looking to implement. So we're in the shoes of being able to educate our clients. And then focusing a lot on making the technology as simple to understand and as simple to adopt as possible. If it's going to be a huge implementation cycle and really be a big distraction for our client's engineering team, then that's a big barrier to them being able to effectively adopt something or even to consider adopting it in the first place.
Andrew, do you see it the same way in terms of reassuring the buyer that all of these pieces will work well together?
Well, I think you can say anything to anyone and tell them it's going to be awesome, but you have to actually do it. Specific to what Adam was talking about how everything's very fragmented, that also applies to just marketing in general, right? Most companies, they have a branding team They have their acquisition team, they have their retention team. They treat all of them separately. They all have very different goals, very different approaches. They work with different partners. So you have 3 teams that are ultimately trying to do the same thing, which is get the most out of the user base, but doing it all in different ways. And then you kind of break that down into the AIDA model, right, which is attention, interest, desire, action. Each service is a certain component of that. But the way that I see it going forward in the future, and what we've been doing here now for the last year, is combining that into one cohesive flow. So you're starting with offline data, right? So we have an example of like a very large financial institution that we work with where they have millions and millions of offline user profiles. No way to connect that with mobile, but they're trying to get mobile adoption and mobile usership. So you pipe that in, you're using someone like an mParticle to be your repository to store that, to gather it up. Then we would match those device IDs with LiveRamp. And then we start a specific user-by-user campaign. So with your cohorts, you start with your attention and interest campaigns, which are, I'm going to show them videos, I'm going to show them small banners, I'm just going to create that 5 to 7 touch points to get their attention and start to get their interest. And then when those users have gone through that flow, same cohorts, you've now created a new bucket of new ads. And then they're seeing that, which is going to push them to install. Then once they've installed, they're dynamically pushed into another cohort, which drives them to do the first sign up. And then after that, it's repeat purchases. So you're starting from offline, nothing, and following that user all the way from attention and interest, your branding, to your user acquisition, to your retargeting, all in one flow. And I think that's going to be the difference here, and that's what we have to show, right? I can tell you it works well, but we have to show you that is rather than having everything separate and siloed, the more you can work across partners and have it be cohesive, the more impactful your marketing campaigns will be.
Jude, so let's say we implemented what our panelists are talking about, that we educate, that we bring technologies that are complementary. What should a buyer or a marketer expect as an outcome? Or another way of asking the question is, what does success look like? Because oftentimes we're selling to folks who are new to this and really don't know what they don't know.
Tough question. I think it really depends on what vertical you're in. Every vertical has its own kind of macro trends associated with it. So let's just pick a couple that are interesting to talk about. I mean, you look at the 4 largest or 5 largest retailers, and their gross profit margins aren't equal to that of Amazon. So if you're in the retail business, you've got a no shit moment, and you need to address that. So the outcomes would be generally around that macro trend. How do you get users to compete in a world with Amazon where you may have actual leverage, which is physical and mobile, physical and digital, to be in a hybrid, for which Amazon is moving the opposite way. So the outcomes would be around customer experience for conversion to retail shopping, and there's lots of technology to do that. I think if you're in the media or entertainment industry, I think you're really worried about natural content and OTT and things like that. So the movement towards going to direct to consumer, and to pick on the follow-up around first-party data and other data, you need to make the relevance of the consumer's experience such that they move faster than your competitor. And that's really the kind of the aha moment, or the aha thing we should be thinking about, which Andy Grove was so good at saying, only the paranoid kind of survive. There are a lot of big macro trends that are happening. And if you look at the smaller entities or properties that are competing against those bigger properties, they're not doing well. And they need to do it through customer experience, and they need to do it through some part of the technologies that we have.
Adam, can you address the question about outcomes and about what does success look like?
Yeah, I mean, it also ties back to your initial question where we were talking about what are the changes, right? I've seen a shift where it's not just about getting users into an app or downloading an app. It's about customer retention and customer lifetime value, right? And we talk about CLTV all the time. But when you start to have this ecosystem of cohesion, you really start to see new insights into how you can create a better customer experience and then maintain those customers. And a great example is a customer we work with that's a delivery service. They were doing a lot in silos, and they were offering discounts, and so they're getting new people buying through the app. Great, everything looks good. But what they realized, when they were able to take some of their case management data from their service desk, they figured out that because they didn't have enough drivers on the street, they were actually hurting their consumer experience, and customers weren't coming back in and engaging. And that data typically sits in entirely different worlds. And so then they were able to optimize around how do they have the demand and the supply in terms of the drivers to align to the discounts they're offering. And so you start to unlock these new insights that truly change the way that you can maintain and retain customers and then treat them as loyal subjects to your brand, right?
Yep. George, what are the kind of outcomes that you talk to your customers in terms of if they follow this path, what might they expect?
Yeah, I mean, what we see is, especially in the mobile world, it's kind of in many ways, it's sort of a winner-take-all dynamic. The app that is doing the best from a revenue standpoint or from a growth or from a retention tends to be the one that shows up on the App Store, or tends to be the one that people install and keep on their phone. I think you see this happening especially in new industries like scooters, right? There's a bunch of companies, and they're all competing to be the one that does it best, given how quickly the market is evolving and growing. So with our customers, a lot of them want to make sure that they are following the best practices in the market, that they are really like moving the fastest, driving the KPIs, whether it's revenue or retention or whatever it may be, and doing it much better than their competitors or the rest of the mobile ecosystem.
Andrew, when you talk to prospects and your customers about outcomes, about expectations, what are some of the things that you're discussing?
You're going to be so happy. You're never going to want to work with anyone else. We talk a lot about different things, and I think it's very specific to what Jude said. Everyone has a different vertical and a different specificity to what they want to do, right? So like a use case with Adam would be you've got a bunch of users who have rated the app, let's say 3, right? Because you always have the feedback where it's like, where would you rate this delivery experience? You rated a 3. What we would be able to do is then we would create a cohort through mParticle that would come in, and we'd start doing specific campaigns around them. It might be just a re-engagement, saying, hey, we saw your experience was this, here's a discount, or it might be just general rebranding of positivity, right? So you can take these interactions throughout the course of a customer's life cycle and then create specific campaigns and touch points around just them specifically, right? Rather than doing just, again, wide scattershot, okay, you've downloaded the app and you've ordered from us, you must have loved it, so go get this. It's like, actually, no, my last experience was a 1-star. Why are you giving me that, right? So we'll take that data, pump it back in, and then dynamically create new cohorts to mirror what that person is doing in their life cycle with you.
So one of the challenges that I've seen around personalization is understanding what an end user wants and what might be pushing it too far. As I asked some folks for my book, if I'm looking at an Armani tie tonight online, is it fair game tomorrow for you to reach out to me while I'm walking through Nordstrom? And the answers I had were everything from, of course you can, to no you can't, to you can do it for a week, which I don't know, where some magical 7-day period elapses, and then you can't do it on day 8. Jude, what's in it for the end user, and how do we know that that end user wants what we're looking to give them, or what we're talking about here?
It's tough. I think you've got to test it. You've got to look at data to try and test it. But generally, I think users are looking for more, I won't even say personalization. I'll say they're looking for more relevance. What's the meaningfulness of the it for which you're presenting me the action of the it? And that's really across all channels. And an example would be, we have a large client that kind of resembles a home shopping network thing. And so, their largest gross revenues are from the TV, and they've moved to web, and they've moved to mobile. And they're driving something like a $20–25 million business just on doing just broadcast push. And as they begin to understand their user base across all of their channels better, and they begin to actually lower the amount of action that they do and pull in the amount of meaningfulness they do, they're seeing 20 and 30% conversions on that. And the user experience for me is very relevant. I have all of our customers' apps on my phone, and I don't want to get a 20% flash sale. I want to get, it's the summer, and I'm looking for a 6-person patio set, and I'm looking at red and yellow. And what do you have?
Right.
So I think that's the obvious. How do you do, it's the obvious, but yet statistically it's still incredibly, incredibly, incredibly small. Like, give you some numbers here. For our business, which is the only business I can really speak to at some level, We get about 5 billion data points on a given day, and we do about 100 million pushes on a given day. And so we've actually seen the volume of that drop, and we've seen the personalization of that rise just in the last 3 quarters, not the last 3 years. So just 3 quarters, we're starting to perhaps do something either with our tools or with our voice that's getting our customers to kind of move faster. And the user experience is obvious because they're converting. They're converting to thank you. I don't want the flash sale, I want the patio set. So you got to go through and do a lot of A/B testing. Got to go through and make a couple of trips and skin your nose, but ultimately that's the direction you're trying to get to for an outcome.
Adam, is personalization a light bulb that comes on? And Jude, when you said relevance, I look at it as it's a continuum. And first you get to relevance as you're working toward personalization. Is that how you see the world as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely a continuum, and it's personalization can apply to a variety of things. Are you personalizing a specific email? Are we personalizing a website? Are we personalizing the app experience? There's a variety of levels to it. Our view on this is that at the end of the day, there's kind of a couple consistencies. And if you start with mobile at the core of how you think about personalization, it's the closest thing to your customer, without a doubt, right? So I don't care if you're a brand that has multiple channels that you engage with your customer. You may have been thinking about the customer in a different way. Mobile should be really kind of at the center of how you think about that experience because it is the most relevant data point generation mechanism that you can work with. And if you build your customer profile with that at the center and the other aspects of how you engage with your customer, through the website, through the in-store shopping experience, you still have a very relevant way to engage them and have that dynamic profile that's always available and always on. And that's for us very core to what we do. And then make it accessible to the different places that data needs to be used in a push vendor, in an analytics capability like what Localytics can bring to the table, in an advertising platform like what the Uplift guys here can bring, right? That is the core of how you personalize independent of what the specific technology is. And so, yeah.
Yeah, we're running short on time. George, briefly, can you just address personalization and pushes? What somebody perceives as value might not be what somebody else perceives as value.
Yeah, we've seen a similar dynamic as Jude alluded to, in that a lot of our clients have gone from just wanting to send broadcast pushes to everyone to now caring much more about making sure that each message they send is personalized and making sure that they're not sending too high of a volume of messages to any individual user. So we've done a lot in working with our clients to take data from them and make it really easy for them to create segments of users so that they're always being mindful and having an easy path to deliver the most relevant notification to the most relevant people.
And Andrew, is this place we're chasing, this personalization, is this the mecca?
What I love about this is that it's basically every time I've done one of these panels or talked about it, we always talk about contextual ads and relevant ads. And I think we're actually at a point where we can do that. It's not about just saying hey, I want to show these types of ads to these types of people. Now again, I've been saying it ad nauseum now, it's user by user specific. So you're not, every brand, every company wants to get client information back. And the best way to receive that info is through your phone. We use it all the time. You can do push. If I click yes to allowing push notification, I'm already a more engaged user. So you learn a lot more about each individual user through your phone. So getting as many people using your app is obviously, at this point, it's ideal, right? We consume 50% of our content through phones as is, and it's only going to get larger. So now we're at the point where, okay, I can effectively measure it. I'm getting that information back. We have partners like this that have progressed very far in the industry to now able to pass the information quickly. So you put all that together into one space, and now I'm not just targeting demographic or geo or category. That used to be a lot of questions I got back in the day was, what kind of targeting did you have? It's not about targeting category or demo, it's about targeting that specific user ID and showing them only what makes sense to them based on all of the data we've gathered through the different touch points. And if you start thinking about it as specific customer lifecycle advertising and not branding advertising or retargeting advertising, right? It's just customer specific lifecycle advertising. That's how you're going to create that blend of reach and personalization.
Yep. That makes a ton of success. I'm waiting for the day when I don't need to bring the meatball sandwich offer out. I've been using this, pulling it out of my pocket for about 10 years of mobile shows. We ran about 2 minutes over. Brian, I apologize. Thank you, panelists. I learned a lot. I hope you did as well in the audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.